Hey everyone, this is another video on the Autodesk Certified User Exam for Fusion 360. And in this video, we're going to take a short look at constraint selection and creation. So as we go into Fusion, we're going to take a look at one. I'm going to go ahead and create a new component, again, getting in this habit. And we'll just call this constraints. And we're not really going to create anything per se in this, but we're just going to at least create a new sketch. And from here, if I'm in my principal work planes, I'll go ahead and choose my front work plane. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and just look at one, what are our constraints here? So when I click on the word constraints, the menu pops down and gives us an option of the different constraints that we have available. So for example, what I usually do is sometimes I'll have a little exercise for my students, but like here, if I draw a line or a couple lines here to just kind of signify what we're kind of working with, here I can usually grab like the horizontal vertical tool or constraint, and by clicking on it, and you'll be able to see an icon that pops up that identifies that a constraint was being applied. So here there's the vertical, so there's that particular one. If I want to use coincident, so coincident goes through, and the best part is if you leave your cursor on any of these constraints, as your students are going to have Fusion 360 available, it does tell them what it does. So again, just practice. Coincident, if I'm able to grab the endpoints of both of these lines, it's going to join them and connect them together. So make those 2 points constrained to one another. If I draw a circle, and for example, if I want to go ahead and have it be tangent, as I kind of work across the constraints, I can choose the circle, choose a line, and it'll make it where it's tangent. Same thing with this bottom one, and now I have some tangent lines, or that are the lines that are tangent to the circle, I should say. So for example, as I move across, equal, if I want the 2 lines to be equal in size to each other, I'll click one and I'll choose the other. You'll notice these are the constraints that are getting applied. So those are some of the things that we can end up doing. If I have 2 lines, and let's say that I want to go ahead and have these, I'm going to draw this one off just by a small amount. And the next one is going to be parallel. So if I choose parallel and choose the 2 lines, it'll automatically go through and make those 2 lines parallel. This one was already horizontal, so it applied an automatic constraint. That's the other thing, as you sketch, you'll find that sometimes as you're sketching, automatic constraints, you'll see there's a preview of the vertical will be applied. If there's ever a case, sometimes Fusion thinks it's being helpful in those, and if it's not, you can always select. You do have to make sure you're not have any of the tools highlighted, but you can always select that constraint, right click and choose delete, or just select the constraint where it's highlighted and hit delete on your keyboard. Now this line will not be constrained to be vertical, but you can see if you do place it back in the vertical position, Fusion will apply an automatic sketch constraint, thinking that it's going to help you out. So that's kind of the process that I go through with my students, is making sure that these lines and different shapes are constrained to each other. So like for example, as I move down through the next one, perpendicular, choosing this line and choosing this line will make a nice 90-degree angle there between those 2 lines. And the other thing is as well, for example, like if I go through and have 2 circles here, and let's say if I lock or fix one of the circles, so that'll turn like a shade of green. And then if I use the tangent constraint, this other circle has to move or size to the other one. So you notice this one did not move or change. So another way to do that again is to show this being worked on. Here we'll apply a sketch dimension of, I'm going to do just 1,000th, so I'm doing really small measurements here, it looks like. So it looks like I was really zoomed in, but I can tangent, and that has to move to the position because this is fixed. So that's kind of what's happening there. All right, some other things as we go through and we kind of sketch as well. If I draw, for example, a rectangle, and if I take a line And as I kind of trace over the line, you'll see an X that'll form. And then you'll notice that an automatic constraint comes up when I'm right in the middle. It shows a triangle. So here, like for example, if I draw this line, and I'm going to purposely kind of draw it off at an angle here, is I'm going to go ahead and choose the midpoint constraint, which has the same triangle symbol. So I'll click the line and I'll click the other line, and again, and so this may go through and show you an error as far as where that's going. So again, you may need to go through and take a look at, you know, what are some options that we need to do. So let me try midpoint again. Let me try the point. There we go. So try the point at the end of the line. So it doesn't really like the line, but it does like the point. And it found the midpoint of our rectangle. So just playing around with these constraints, I'm going to go ahead and move this point here until it's vertical. And actually you're going to see, here's what's going to happen. It picked up the midpoint and it has the two triangles. So to kind of signify that we do have a connection being made to that midpoint. So the other ones we have 4 more options here, which are just when we're drawing with constraints, selection, and deleting. For concentric, I kind of use this as an example of having a bullseye. So what we do is when we click like 2 circles, they are going to share the same center point, and then they're going to have concentric or concentricity to them as they go through and work there. Colinear is a really kind of neat option. A lot of times what I use colinear for is, like for example, if you're drawing kind of like this T shape, or have something like this, where, let me go ahead and just touch the end, and then it'll help track there. There we are. So for example, if you want the two sides, this line that I've selected and this one to be like on the same level, I like to use colinear. And when I choose that line and I choose the other one, these have to stay colinear, which means now if I click and drag, those lines have to stay in the same position. Or if I was to take a line between them, it would be connected by a horizontal line, just like so. So we would be able to see that effect. You know, they have to stay in a colinear fashion. The last two was symmetry and curvature. So I really don't use these quite as often, but like for symmetry, you know, like, so this rectangle is pretty well kind of set there. Same kind of scenario. Let's use this option. I'm gonna get rid of this line that I just drew, and let's say I go ahead and draw a vertical line down here. I'm gonna go ahead and select it and toggle to a construction line. So we'll use this as some construction geometry. Same kind of thing if we have, again, so here's the bottom. So you'll notice I can move this in, but this side does not move with it. So I'm going to go ahead and choose symmetry. So this goes through and has us choosing. So first it says select the objects. So here I want to choose this line, and I want to choose this line. And then the last thing it says select the symmetry line. So this is the only one that really has a 3-click option. So if I click the one in the center, now we're going to have symmetry, and if I move this one, it moves the outside as well. So it has to maintain symmetry with the mirror line that's right down the center, or the line of symmetry, we should say. So it kind of gets treated like a mirror line, if you kind of think of it as well. So that's kind of what we do with those. Again, you can go through, and here you can use curvature. So again, this one I've not used quite as much. So I usually use some things like tangent and some other constraints that work really well. But just become familiar with a lot of the constraints and get used to how to edit them. Maybe go through and apply new ones, and maybe even have to go through and delete. So like for example, if I wanted to not have these two be tangent, I can delete that, and now I can pull them apart. And so that way that you don't have those existing relationships. So hopefully this was a good review of constraints and how to apply them, how to delete them, and how to change and utilize in different scenarios. Again, practice with sketches, practice with geometry to test these out and see how these behaviors are applied and the relationships that you see when you use the different constraints. Hopefully you learned a lot from this. In the next video, we'll check out another exam objective, and be sure if you have questions, send me an email. I'd be happy to go through and talk through anything on the Autodesk Certified User Exam for Fusion 360.